Madam Speaker, I ask to address the House for 1 minute for the purposes of inquiring about next week's schedule.
Without objection.
I thank the Speaker, and I yield to the gentleman from Maryland, the Majority Leader, for the purposes of announcing next week's schedule.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Madam Speaker, on Monday the House will meet at 12:30 p.m. for morning hour debate and 2 p.m. for legislative business, with votes postponed until 6:30 p.m. On Tuesday the House will meet at 8 a.m. for morning hour debate. The House will then meet at 9 a.m. for legislative business and recess immediately. The House will reconvene at approximately 10 a.m. In a joint meeting with the Senate to receive Her Excellency Dr. Angela Merkel, Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany. On Wednesday and Thursday, Madam Speaker, the House will meet at 10 a.m. for legislative business. On Friday, the House will meet at 9 a.m. for legislative business. We will consider several bills under suspension of the rules. The complete list of suspension bills will be announced by the close of business today. In addition, Madam Speaker, we will consider the Expedited Card Reform for Consumer Act of 2009, H.R. 2868, the Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Act of 2009, and H.R. 3962, Affordable Health Care for America Act. I yield back to the gentleman from Virginia.
Madam Speaker, I thank the gentleman. I'd like to ask the gentleman if he could give us any indication about the days on which we could expect these particular bills to be debated and voted upon on the House floor, and I yield.
I would expect, I thank the gentleman for yielding, I would expect the credit card bill to be considered as early as Wednesday, and the Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Act to be considered as early as Wednesday or Thursday, and the Affordable Health Care Act as early as Thursday.
I thank the gentleman for that. Madam Speaker, I would like to say to the gentleman that I noticed that this morning we Republicans, just like the public, were not allowed to attend the Speaker's unveiling of the public option bill this morning. And I know that the gentleman here on this House floor and I have always talked about the need for transparency. Certainly at this particular occasion in the press conference, the public nor any Republican was allowed to attend. And I note for the record, Madam Speaker, I know the gentleman knows this, that the steps of the Capitol are and should be open to the public. And I would think, Madam Speaker, that in the spirit of trying to work together when we have such a transformative piece of domestic legislation, that if there is a press conference for the public on public grounds to discuss public option, it should be open to all. And, Madam Speaker, I just felt that the gentleman would agree with me on that. But I would like to, at this point, turn to what the events of next week will be.
Will the gentleman yield before we get on?
I yield.
Next week?
I yield.
I'm informed that Fox News is talking a lot about this, but the fact of the matter is it was open to the public. There were public there, as a matter of fact. If the gentleman's contention is somehow this was walled off or there were people who were prohibiting people from being there in attendance at the rollout of America's health care bill, I was there. I saw nobody turned away. I saw nobody precluded from attending. And if the gentleman's contention is that every time he has a press conference, he calls me up or somebody else up and says, by the way, I'm having a press conference. If you want to come by, come by. I will check my phone records and my email and any other messages that I have, but the gentleman and I both know that doesn't happen. We have been considering this bill for some period of time. I'll go into that a little later, but I think the gentleman's contention that somehow he or any other Republican was precluded from being on the site at the foot of the Capitol steps is incorrect, and I reject it.
Madam Speaker, and I don't intend to belabor this point with the gentleman, but I do know for a fact that individuals were precluded from entering, and I'm told that invitations were issued with RSVPs, and if you were not on the list of RSVPs, you couldn't enter, and I do know for a fact that people were prohibited from doing so. And again, Madam Speaker, I would say this is not just some ordinary press conference. This was a press conference held on the front steps of the Capitol. This was a press conference, the subject of which was a piece of legislation that pretends to transform 1/6 of this economy, of this country, and to deal with the most personal issues of health care, universally applied to all people. So I do thank the gentleman for his concern and his belief that it should have been open, because I believe as well.
My belief, so we accurately express it,
I yield.
that it was open.
Again, I don't want to belabor the point any further. I just, politely disagree with the gentleman not having known, and the fact is there were people stopped from entering. With that, Madam Speaker, I would turn to some inquiries that I have about how we are going to proceed in discussing this massive 1,990 pages of legislation. How it is that if the gentleman believes that we are going to be taking it up as early as Thursday, then could he tell us if the bill itself in general, does it resemble H.R. 3200? And I yield.
There are certainly, I thank the gentleman for yielding, there are certainly, as I think I indicated in the press, the three committees worked off that base. The three committees, as you know, reported somewhat different bills. Those bills have been put together, and there are additions and subtractions from that bill. But I would say to the gentleman that the overwhelming part of that bill is, as I have indicated, been online for over 3 months, that there have been literally thousands of town meetings with reference to the substance of the bill, not the specific bill that was just put on the line at 10 a.m. this morning. And now there are 8 million hits on the Rules Committee website, downloads, so that Americans are doing what we indicated we give them the opportunity to do and we wanted them to do. I'm sure you have, I don't know whether you personally have, but I'm sure your side has downloaded it as well. And from that standpoint, the notice that we promised to give is being given. It is a massive bill. It is a very consequential bill. We believe it's a very important bill for every American family, every American business, and for our country. And so that bill is going to get and has been getting, over the last, frankly, 8 months, where we've had a large number of hearings from 2007 to this date, somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 hearings. I'm not sure of that specific number. I had it, but I can't call it right now. But markups on the bills, over 100 amendments presented in each committee and considered and voted upon, so that this bill, as I said before in the colloquy last week, has had more discussion, more town meetings, has been read more extensively than any bill in the 29 years that I've been here in the House of Representatives. So again, I would reiterate to the gentleman that this bill has received extraordinary oversight, extraordinary review, and extraordinary input from the citizens of this country, and indeed in the markups on the three committees, input from the members of the three committees.
I thank the gentleman, and as the gentleman knows, Madam Speaker, not everyone of the members in this body serve on one of those three committees. And from what I can gather of the gentleman's statement, that if the discussion in committees and the discussion in the town halls across this country over the summer were indicative of the discussion surrounding this new bill, then perhaps I am to conclude that this bill is H.R. 3200, because the point, Madam Speaker, is that this is a new bill. It was unveiled today. And again, I pointed out to the gentleman, Madam Speaker, very troubling that it was unveiled in a closed press conference. Somehow the majority felt and the Speaker felt it necessary to block Republicans and the public from that unveiling. And now we have a new bill. It is over 1,900, nearly 2,000 pages long. So we do have a concern, Madam Speaker, that we have adequate time to look at this bill, to understand this bill, to debate this bill. So I'd ask the gentleman how much time for debate will be given on this House floor of this 1,990-page bill, and I yield.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Let me again express the fact that I believe this bill has received the most extensive consideration of any bill since I've been in Congress. Now, that hasn't always happened. The gentleman has been here for a number of years, and he was here, I believe, on June 25th, 2003. He recalls that that was a bill which was the most massive change in Medicare in over a quarter of a century. The gentleman probably recalls that bill, prescription drug bill, referred to affectionately. I know the gentleman must clearly remember how we considered that bill. But if he, just on the off chance he doesn't, let me remind him. On June 25th, 2003, a new version was introduced and referred to committee. Here they, new bill introduced, referred to committee on June 25th. On June 26th, at 6:20 a.m. in the morning, a rule for martial law was considered by the Rules Committee, with 3 hours of debate and a wrangle substitute permitted with 1 hour of debate. On June 26th, at 6:55 p.m., debate began pursuant to House Resolution 299, and the House proceeded with 3 hours of general debate. On 6:27, at 2:32 a.m., there was a 50-minute vote, and the bill passed 216-215 after all of about 36 hours of exposure, from introduction to passage. Now, that bill, of course, went to conference, and it came back from conference. Let me remind my friend about the timing on the conference report. On 11/21 at 2003 at 1:17 a.m., conference report was filed. At 11/21/2003 at 3:41 p.m., I'll wait while Mr. Hoffman gives you some advice and counsel, perhaps. At 2 hours and approximately 20 minutes later, martial law consideration of conference report by the Rules Committee. At 11:21 the same day, at 2003, at 11:26 p.m. Now, this started at 1:17 a.m. in the morning. At 11:26 p.m., it passed the House, the rule. Now, at 11:36 p.m., 10 minutes later, Mr. Thomas brought up the conference report for consideration. At 11:22, at 2:39 a.m., we began to vote. I'm sure you remember that vote. It took 3 hours. Now, of course, we had this under consideration from the day before at 1:17 a.m., when the conference report was reported back. And this side of the aisle won for 2 hours and 45 minutes, while you spent time changing votes on your side of the aisle. And you were ultimately successful. And about 2 hours and 55 minutes into that particular vote, the longest vote in which I've considered, and frankly the longest time this was considered as a piece of legislation, you changed the votes and it won 211 to 222. At 11:22 at 5:50 a.m. So in other words, the consideration of the conference report was laid on the table at 11:21/2003 for the Rules Committee consideration, and by 11:22 at 5:50 a.m., about 30 hours later, it was passed. So I tell my friend, in reviewing this, this was an 800-page bill, by the way, no extensive hearings on that bill. And by the way, when you had press conferences regarding that bill, none of us were invited. You know that, and I know that. So I tell my friend, with all due respect, this saying that the Democrats have rolled out a bill, we rolled out a bill 4 months ago. We rolled out a bill 6 months ago. We rolled out hearings 8, 9, and 10 months ago. Your major piece of legislation, 25 years, the most significant amendment to the Medicare Act that had passed to that period of time, you passed with less than 48 hours notice from the Rules Committee consideration to the passage. We've said we've had months of consideration, months of debate, months of transparency on the web. Now on the web, we're going to give you, as I promised we would, at least 72 hours notice to read that bill and to have it considered on this floor. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for that history.
I knew you'd be interested. That's why I wanted to
interpretation of that history. I asked the simple question, Madam Speaker, of how long the debate will be on this House floor of a bill that's been just introduced, and according to the gentleman, maybe it's not this bill that's just been introduced, maybe it is H.R. 3200, because that's what's been the discussion across this country up until now. But, Madam Speaker, this is a bill that now is being reported to be presented at a cost of $2 million a word, 5 times longer than the Torah, longer than the well-known work of War and Peace. That's how long this bill is. It's a new bill. I'm simply asking, how much time can we expect to have for debate on the floor of this transformative piece of legislation that will alter 1/6 of the country's economy? And I yield.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I would respond to him more time than we had to consider the prescription drug bill, the major amendment to the Medicare bill, and by a factor of months and months and months more time to consider the substance of this bill. I tell my friend again, and he knows this well, we've had hearings on health care reform from 2007 to this day. We have had 81 hours of committee markup. We've had over 86 hours of hearings. We've had over 203 hours of caucuses on our side. I presume you've had a similar time, I'm sure, paying attention to this bill that's been available to you. It's been 80 days from the time the House bill was first introduced, of which this is obviously an offshoot. The public has been able to view the bill, and extensive information about it's online the entire time. It's been 126 days since, as I said, the House discussion draft was first made available online. I think every one of us has had ample opportunity to debate the bill and offer amendments. During the markup, 129 amendments were offered by Republicans. You act as if all of a sudden this is a brand new day. It may be a brand new day tomorrow, but the legislation has been under consideration for a long time. Have we made changes? We have. Are those changes so major that your side can't consider them and analyze them over the next 72-plus hours, because it would be longer than 72 hours? I think the answer to that is no. You certainly have that capability and have been focusing on this very carefully. We promised the 72 hours on the bill and on any manager's amendment that might be offered subsequently, and we're going to do that. So I tell my friend, I just don't believe that it's a fair criticism to say that a bill that has been discussed, analyzed, more public hearings than any other bill, perhaps certainly in my career in this House, has somehow all of a sudden come as a surprise to your side of the aisle.
Madam Speaker, I thank the gentleman. I'm just asking a simple question. There's no criticism here. There's plenty of that, I know, in this body. I'm asking a simple question, Madam Speaker. How long are we going to be allowed for debate on this floor on this bill? And I yield.
And what I said was that the Rules Committee has not met yet. But I think clearly there will be more debate, as there has been an extraordinarily more debate on this bill up to this time. There will be more debate than we had available to us with respect to the massive amendment and legislation that you offered with reference to Medicare. And I believe that there will be sufficient time made available over the consideration of this bill for both sides to make their case.
I thank the gentleman. As I'm not, Madam Speaker, being too successful in eliciting a response that is definitive, I would ask the gentleman, when we're considering this bill that is not affecting one program like Medicare, like he referred to in 2003 in Part D, while we're considering a bill that is dealing with 1/6 of our economy, every aspect of health care in America comes under this bill. What is it that he has, that the Majority Leader has in mind in terms of the ability for all members of this body to represent their constituents, to offer amendments, to have their voices heard on this floor? If the gentleman could please enlighten me and our colleagues as to what the amendment process will be on this bill, and I yield.
I know the gentleman wants to somehow diminish that little tiny bill of some 800, 900 pages that amended Medicare and created prescription drug, and I don't know whether he recalls how many amendments our side was given. I would yield to him if he recalls, but if he doesn't recall, the answer is zero. Why? Because you had considered that bill a long time. Your proposition was that we had all had an opportunity to discuss it, albeit 1/10 or 1/100th of the time that this piece of legislation has been under consideration. But there were no amendments from this side allowed. But what we did have allowed was a substitute. Now, I will tell my friend, and I've said before, that I presume that you've told me, your side has told me you have a bill. Somebody waved it around, as a matter of fact, on national television. I presume that hopefully you're going to get that scored. Hopefully you'll give us 72 hours notice of that. And once we get the score and the 72 hours notice of your substitute, we'll be glad to consider it. But I will tell the gentleman that we expect the same 72 hours notice, and we expect it to be scored. And I will help the gentleman facilitate the scoring of your substitute.
I thank the gentleman, and I would ask the gentleman if he could be a little bit more specific about the amendment deadline, so our members can be adequately put on notice for that, and I yield.
Well, there's no amendment deadline. The committee has not requested amendments at this point in time.
Madam Speaker, I would ask the gentleman then, does that mean there'll be no amendments allowed, and I yield? I just
indicated to you that you recall that after you brought this massive bill, I suggest, you want to diminish 900 pages. Ours is longer because it deals with a broader subject. You're correct in giving every American health care, and including, by the way, expanding protections to senior citizens on the donut hole that was incorporated in that bill. There were no amendments offered, and my presumption is your theory was that it had been so carefully constructed that you didn't want to have amendments to that bill, but you did, in fact, allow us a substitute, and we offered that substitute. I would say to the gentleman, as I've said before, that certainly I believe that you ought to have, and we're going to invite you to have a substitute and introduce your alternative that you have been talking about now for some months. I hope that you have submitted it to CBO for scoring, and we would expect 72 hours notice of that substitute before it's brought to the floor, as you expect us to give you 72 hours notice of our bill and of our manager's amendment. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I would expect that he would inform us of exactly when that vote will take place in order for us to know when that 72-hour period would be triggered. As far as our substitute, if the gentleman is offering us a substitute, would be submitted in order to meet what he imposes as a deadline on us. Madam Speaker, I would ask, though, I still don't understand about the posture of amendments. I know that there are many members in this House. In fact, there may very well be a close to a majority, if not more, than a majority of members of this House who are interested in amendments having to do with the protection of life in this bill on health care and the question of prohibiting government funding of abortion. And I would ask the gentleman whether we are going to be given an opportunity to vote on that issue through the amendment process, and I yield.
I think that question will be addressed.
I'm sorry, to the...
I think that question will be addressed. The answer is yes.
I thank you, Madam Speaker, and there's also the issue of the conscience clause as to whether that will also be a subject of an amendment to this bill, as many of our members, if not a majority, are interested in that as well, and I yield.
I think, as the previous issue, I think that will be addressed. As a matter of fact, there is some reference to it, as you know, in existing legislation and existing law. We have not changed that. And the answer is, my presumption is that will be considered, will be addressed.
Well, I thank the gentleman. I would just point out, I'm sure as he knows, the law that perhaps he's referring to are riders on appropriations bills, and as well, I think he is well aware that courts have indicated if there is silence on the issue of life and government funding of abortion, that necessarily goes against those who want to see the prohibition of the government funding of abortion, which is why it is so important that this House take up that issue.